He arrives late on purpose, not for drama, but for rhythm. The crowd squints into the glare and misses what matters. The oar in his hands, carved into a brutal wooden blade. No lacquer, no ceremony. He doesn't worship style. He reads it, breaks it, and walks on. If you came for a statue, you'll be disappointed. If you came for the system that beat legends, stay close. He was not born Musashi. As a child, he was Benosuke, son of a difficult swordsman, possibly named Munisai. As he grew into the edge of his temper, he carried the name Shinmen Takezō. Names in that era shifted with lords, vows, and disgrace. They were weather, not birthrights. After war, after shame, after being tied to a gate and cut down by truth, a new name began to appear. Miyamoto Musashi. Miyamoto was soil. Musashi was fire. It was not who he was. It was who he chose to become. They say his first duel happened when he was just 13. Not in a training hall, not with a friend. It was a real duel. To the death, in the dust, with no audience. Historical records don't confirm every detail, but in his own writings, Musashi claims that as a child, he killed a man in single combat. Some accounts name the opponent as Arima Kihei, a practitioner of the Shinto Ryu. Others don't even give him a name. At the time, Takezō, as he was still called, was known for being unkempt, dirty, and wild. He didn't carry a proper scabbard. His blade was tucked directly into his belt like a stick of firewood. He didn't know how to bow, but he knew how to wait, and he knew when to go first. That day, he didn't learn technique. He learned truth. That the man who moves second often dies first. That hesitation bleeds. That you win not by being faster, but by refusing to follow the rules everyone else thinks are sacred. He walked away from that duel not as a hero, but as a student of reality, and something changed. Not improved, not purified, just hardened. After that, the boy left. Not out of fear, but instinct. He no longer belonged to the place that had raised him. Year is 1600. Japan is torn into fractured loyalties and collapsing lineages. The Battle of Sekigahara is more than a clash of armies. It is the moment one era dies and another is born. The Tokugawa shogunate will rule for over 250 years. Among the thousands of soldiers moving across muddy fields and forested ridges walks a young man named Shinmen Takezō. Whether he fought in the main line or in skirmishes in the distant Kyushu front, historians still debate. But one thing is certain, he was there, and he learned what no duel could teach. In mass combat, timing isn't yours. You run when others stand. You wait when your own blood screams to move. Orders ripple through ranks like waves. Tempo becomes a shared creature, not a personal choice. Takezō learned the sound of coordinated violence, the tremor in the earth before a cavalry charge, the pause in shouting just before swords collide. He learned that a group can breathe like a single chest. And when that breath breaks, when that rhythm collapses, the whole army can fall apart. Later in life, when he faced 20 men alone in the woods near Kyoto, he didn't watch their hands. He listened to their collective heartbeat. Sekigahara wasn't a heroic chapter in his story. It was a classroom without chalk, just mud, steel, and rhythm. When he returned home, he returned as a stranger. His village, Miyamoto, no longer saw a boy. They saw a threat. He was leaner, darker, distant. A young man who had killed. A boy who didn't ask questions, only watched too closely. In the fictionalized account made famous by Eiji Yoshikawa's novel Musashi, Takezō is captured and tied to a wooden gate, not because of any specific crime, but because of his wildness. because no one knew what to do with someone who didn't fit back into the frame they had left behind. There, bound and left to rot under the judgment of his own people, comes a shadow in the shape of a monk, Takuan Soho. In real history, Takuan was a Zen master, a writer, and a fierce mind who challenged the samurai class to think beyond their swords. He wrote letters to men like Yagyu Munenori, the shogun's fencing instructor. In them, he speaks of non-attachment, clarity, and action without hesitation. Whether Takuan ever met Musashi face to face, we don't know, but the idea of him stuck. In story, Takuan doesn't teach Takezō technique. He teaches him how to empty, how to stop reacting to every offense, how to hold still without needing to strike, how to wait without tension, and to move without explanation. And when the ropes are cut, the boy doesn't walk out as a man. He walks out as someone who has stopped fighting himself and finally begun to walk. By the time he steps onto Kyoto's sacred ground, he no longer calls himself Shinmen Takezō. He has taken two names: Miyamoto, after the small village in Mimasaka where he was born, and Musashi, a deliberate reading of the same characters once read as Takezō, now reborn with meaning. Martial repository, a name forged, not inherited. It marks the end of the boy and the beginning of the warrior who would define his own destiny. Takezō was a boy who had to survive. Musashi was a man who would begin to teach himself how to live. Kyoto, the old capital, elegant, layered, ritualized. A city where every gesture meant something, and every school had a history. The Yoshioka school was one of those names people didn't question. Founded by a sword master who once served the Ashikaga shogunate, it had become less a martial art and more a house of honor, generational, rigid, and proud. Then came Musashi, young, abrasive, alone, with no students behind him, no patron to shield him, just skill and the willingness to break people's expectations. The first duel was with Seijuro Yoshioka, the current head. Musashi arrived late, intentionally. Some said it was rude. Others began to suspect it was strategy. The fight was brief, brutal, decisive. Next came Denshichiro, Seijuro's brother. He was better prepared, more structured. But Musashi had already figured out the school's rhythm, and he refused to play by its rules. Another quick, merciless win. Honor in Kyoto began to ripple. Yoshioka's reputation, once solid, started to fray. To save face, they scheduled a third duel with the youngest heir, a child, but set a trap. Dozens of hidden fighters waited near Ichijoji Temple, expecting to crush Musashi with numbers. But Musashi arrived early, scouted the terrain, picked his angles, and when the appointed hour came, he was already moving. He didn't walk into an ambush. He tore through it. What happened at Ichijoji wasn't a duel. It was an autopsy of a system that had grown too proud to adapt. He didn't destroy the Yoshioka school because it was weak. He destroyed it because it was predictable. In a time when most warriors wore two swords but used only one, Musashi did something different. He began fighting with both, not for spectacle, not to impress, but because he saw something others didn't, a blind spot. If one hand could pressure, two could overwhelm. If one blade could dominate a line, two could close the angle. This was the birth of Niten Ichi Ryu. Two heavens, one school. There is no mysticism in it, no spiritual metaphor, just pressure, timing, leverage. One blade opens the door, the other walks through. In Musashi's system, your offhand doesn't hang idle. It creates obligations, feints, frames, checks. Your dominant hand ends the conversation. And yet, he never taught this as a trick. He taught it as a way of thinking. See the world in parallel. One eye reads threat, the other reads escape. One hand stirs noise, the other delivers silence. Those who tried to imitate him often failed, because they thought it was about using two weapons. But Musashi understood. Two swords are not two weapons. They are one decision made from two directions. A system that cannot be tested is just a story. That's why, after Kyoto, we hear the legends, not as distractions, but as stress tests. One tale speaks of Shishido Baiken, a master of the kusarigama, chain and sickle, a chaotic weapon, deadly in tight spaces. Musashi, we're told, dodged the sweeping chain, closed the gap, and dropped Baiken in one decisive move. Another name surfaces, Muso Gonosuke, a skilled staff fighter. Some say he fought Musashi and survived, even pushed him back. A rare thing. After retreating into deep study, Gonosuke developed the Jo, a shorter staff designed specifically to challenge dual blade users. He would go on to found Shinto Muso Ryu, a tradition still practiced today. Are the stories true? Hard to say, but the principles ring clear. Line versus circle, rhythm versus pause. Break the pattern before it becomes law. Musashi's system didn't survive because it was always right. It survived because it was built to adapt. He didn't master every answer. He mastered how to change the question in the middle of the sentence. Ganryujima, a tiny island between provinces and the site of a duel that painters have loved too much. On one side, Sasaki Kojiro, famous for his elegant form, his long sword, and his signature move, the swallow return, a cut that changed direction mid-flight. He was refined, respected, a man of style. On the other side, Musashi. He did not arrive on time. He did not wear his best. On the boat to the island, he carved a bokken, a wooden sword, out of an oar. Not for drama, but because the oar was longer than a normal blade, heavier, cruder, and enough to unnerve his opponent. By the time Musashi stepped onto the beach, the duel had already begun, in everyone else's mind. Kojiro was angered. That anger slowed him. Musashi didn't bow, he moved. Straight into the sun, straight into Kojiro's favorite angle. One strike, not graceful, not artistic, final. The duel ends, and the myth begins. But look past the romance. This wasn't about outsorting Kojiro. It was about breaking the tempo, stealing the air from a man who relied on applause. The duel didn't make Musashi a legend. It simply showed that he already understood what legends forget. Years later, Musashi retires to a cave called Reigando in the hills of Higo province. Not to disappear, but to write. There, he composes Gorin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings. It's not a guide to swordsmanship, it's a guide to perception. 5 chapters, 5 lenses for seeing conflict. Earth, structure, stance, weight, foundation. Water, adaptability, shape yourself to fit the moment. Fire, aggression, act before the opponent organizes thought. Wind, observation, study other styles, learn their habits and assumptions. Void, pure instinct, when the mind no longer interrupts the body. His writing is stripped down, no metaphors, no honorifics, just clarity. In strategy, it is necessary to treat training as part of normal life. The way of the warrior applies equally to one-on-one duels and 10,000-man battles. He doesn't tell you how to fight. He tells you how to see. And what you steal from Musashi today doesn't have to involve a blade. You steal his principles, start earlier, cut before explanation forms, control angle, rhythm, and emotion. And when the crowd is waiting for a show, deliver silence. He didn't leave behind a legend to be worshipped. He left a system you can learn. Miyamoto Musashi died in 1645. He was not surrounded by banners or disciples in uniform. He didn't go out in a blaze of glory. He wrote until the end, quietly, and gave away his possessions like a man who knew the blade was no longer the sharpest thing he carried. No statues, no temples, but 5 chapters carved into time. A method, a way of seeing, and a reminder that silence often cuts deeper than spectacle. If you felt something in this story, a rhythm, a principle, a question that still echoes, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the channel. It's the simplest way to keep this kind of content alive. If you'd like to go one step further and support what we do, hit the join button here on YouTube or visit us on Patreon. Both unlock the same exclusive content. Everyone who joins as a channel member or a patron gets weekly access to something special, The Way of the Empty Hand, a book we're releasing 1 chapter at a time every Saturday, exclusively for supporters. Though the story takes place over 250 years after Musashi, it carries the same spirit, a study of warriors, philosophy, and what it means to walk alone. You'll also get a 15-minute narrated audio chapter every week, both here and on Patreon. And if you want to help even more, like this video, share it, follow us on social media, send it to someone who needs to hear it. This isn't just about history. It's about how we train now, how we move through confusion, how we build rhythm in a world that wants us reactive and weak. Musashi is gone, but the system remains. Thank you for watching. Support the dojo. Study the rhythm. Train like you write your name with it.